All right.
Tom Scharstein, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Absolutely, man. Tom is a person who stutters, who currently lives in Jupiter, Florida. He's currently a project manager for a South Florida commercial contracting firm and owns a cabinet refacing company. In these roles, has a lot of interactions with other folks, so good opportunity to push out of the comfort zone, and we'll get to why that's important for people that stutter. Tom serves on the NSA Board of Directors with oversight of the adult chapters. During the past 3 years under his leadership, the number of adult chapters has increased by about 40%, and the number of chapter leaders has doubled. Toastmasters has been a really important part of his journey, and we'll no doubt talk about those experiences. So he tries to take every opportunity to speak to folks and to share the word of what he wants to say and about people that stutter in general, which is fantastic. He has been known to compete effectively in some of the Toastmasters competitions, which is a source of enjoyment for anybody, but for a person that stutters, I'm sure it feels especially good. I have not participated in that, but I can imagine. And we'll get into some of the other details as the conversation goes on. But Tom, welcome again. And
thanks, Mike.
Yeah, man. And
glad to be here.
So just jumping right into it. So we'd like to, kind of start from the earlier stages of the journey, and many of us have had some pretty tough experiences in childhood and sometimes beyond as well. But for most of us, it started in childhood. Do you have any experiences that were especially tough at the time that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I grew up in a religion that had me convinced that my stuttering was because I lacked faith in God, and so I was actually believed that. So it was kind of a rough start, and I'm glad I don't feel that way anymore. Believe me, but
So it was essentially you were getting the message that you were internalizing at that age that the stuttering was essentially your fault because you weren't trusting in God enough for him to kind of set you free to talk, so to speak.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
And any particular horror stories that stick in your mind that were pretty tough at the time?
Well, just real quickly, there were certain advancement levels in the religion. So to get to the next one, I had to do public speaking, and of course, my stuttering at that point, I wasn't able to speak. I tried, I just wasn't able to do it. In fact, I couldn't make any sound. Mike, they actually led me off the stage because I guess they felt sorry for me because I was just standing there and nothing was happening, man. I was trying everything. So they, so I still wanted to move ahead. So they gave me this assignment that believe it or not, I gladly took at that time because I was so eager to help and to serve, and it was to fill the toilet paper for the next meeting. And I'm embarrassed to say that I did that for a month, but that's what kind of opened my eyes to, well, maybe stuttering doesn't have anything to do with my faith. And if they're wrong about that, they could be wrong about some other things. So really stuttering helped me get away from that mindset. So I am thankful for my stuttering. That's just one of the reasons that I'm thankful that I stutter.
So if you had not had the stutter, then you would have gotten up to give the required speech to move to the next level in the religion, and presumably wouldn't have had a problem with it, and you would have progressed and stayed kind of on the good path, if you will, quote unquote, within the church, and he would have never gotten out of it.
Yeah, you'd see me knocking at your door on Saturday mornings trying to sell you a Bible.
rather than saving, well, not saving, but rather than, you know, being a very effective advocate for people that stutter, you would have been still using those skills and talents on evangelical activities, perhaps.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So, you know, it's interesting, that whole thing about, do things happen for a reason, right? Even things that we spent large periods of our time, of our life, perhaps wishing that we did not have, but you get to a certain point where you're happy with the way things have turned out, and you look back and, you know, we would have been someone else in many cases if we hadn't had the exact struggles and challenges that we had in life, you know?
Yeah.
And that's a very...
I definitely agree with you. Yeah, definitely.
And that's a very, a big change of perspective, because I know for myself and most of the people that stutter I've talked to, I mean, there was a super strong feeling in childhood. Like, why me? I wish I didn't have this thing. And we've all been in those tough experiences, whether you're in class and it's the first day and they're going around the class and you're counting down until you're going to have to start again. So it's nice to get to a point where you can see how it's actually made you and other people in the world better off that we have this thing as opposed to not having it. So that's awesome. Yeah. So you get you have that epiphany. So when they reassigned you, when they were essentially like, okay, Tom, you're having a tough time with the speech. And correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, at that point, you weren't to a point yet where you would just stand up there and still give the speech, but just stutter. If you were going to stutter, then essentially you weren't going to stay up there and expose yourself and just battle through words as much, or did they insist on you coming off the stage? Or were you happy when they kind of bailed you out and said, okay, you don't have to keep standing up there?
During that point in my life, Mike, that's a really good question, by the way. And during that point in my life, you know, stuttering didn't make sense to me. I mean, of course, stuttering still doesn't make sense to me, but in my youth, it really didn't make sense. I mean, I couldn't understand, you know, how I could take this Bible passage that I was supposed to read that Thursday night, and I could, you know, in my locked bedroom beyond the earshot of anyone else, I could read it perfectly. But yet I get up on stage and I couldn't make a sound, you know. So basically I was up there for what seemed like an eternity, and I just, you know, realistically, probably a minute and a half, something like that, and I couldn't make a sound. And I don't think that anyone really knew what to do. I mean, I was doing all the tricks that I could think of, but I mean, nothing was happening. And at that time, you know, I think because my self-esteem was so low, and I didn't really have any confidence, you know, just kind of jumping off the cliff, you know, and at that time, it didn't work.
Yeah. And how old were you, approximately?
19 or 20.
Okay.
Yeah, about 19 or 20. Yeah.
I had a similar experience at 15 in a high
Oh,
school social studies class where I was supposed to give a speech on Genghis Khan, or a little presentation on Genghis Khan. And I get up and I say, Genghis Khan was. And in those days, I didn't like the sound of stuttering, so I would choose to silent block. So I said, Genghis Khan was. And I silent blocked like that for probably 2 minutes. And I couldn't think of any substitute word for born, right? Like,
yeah.
emerged out of his mom or arrived. I couldn't
Yeah.
think of one, you know? Uh,
Sure.
and so I silent blocked for a couple minutes that felt like an hour, and then eventually sat down after a couple minutes. Uh, and then a few months after that, I was supposed to give a presentation in science class on a little invention I had made. And so going into that, I was like, man, I got to do something different than the Genghis Khan speech. And in both cases, I was just dreading it for weeks, months, from the moment I
Oh,
learned
yeah.
how to give the speech, right?
Yeah, of
It's
course.
feeling like you're going to get exposed for somebody that can't talk like all the normal people, which is how I
Yeah.
thought about it then. You feel like a freak essentially,
Yeah.
um, right? And like you're not a full member of the human race. Honestly, is how I felt at that point. It's not true in retrospect. I fully was, but I didn't know it, and so going into the second speech, I said, okay, I can say the words, that I know I can get out. So I was like, if I come up against a challenging word, I'm just going to say, and maybe that'll break the word free. So I ended up saying, probably 300 times in a, whatever, 12 minutes speech or so. And this is the, like 16 in a row. Sort of thing. And so anyway, yeah, that was my similar type of experience to your own, and just pure kind of shame and embarrassment. Um,
Right.
and I think
Right.
that's probably the worst part of stuttering for many of us. Can't speak universally because everybody has different experiences, but those themes run deep in people prior to hopefully getting to a point of self-acceptance and a point of the mentality, look, I've got a speech impediment. It is what it is. And
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
still going to say what I want to say. And I'm going to tell you I got a stutter. And if you got a problem with it, well, you're not, the kind of person I probably want to hang out with anyway,
Yeah.
sort
Yeah.
of thing, right? Rather than that childhood thing, which is everybody else is normal and I'm weird and
Right.
I gotta
Right.
I gotta do everything I can to fool people as to
Yeah.
whether I'm a fluent speaker or not.
Yeah.
You know?
I got you.
But that was, yeah. So after well, so the church, rather than making you speak in front of everybody, they said you can change the toilet paper rolls for X number of bathrooms for X amount of time. And during that time is when you said, maybe this isn't the place for me. And so you started to turn the page in life. So what was the next chapter of life for you?
So because of the um, uh, difficulty that I had in high school, because really my high school was hell. Back in those days, basically during the 70s and the early 80s, I mean, people could openly mock you in class. They could laugh at you. I mean, I had teachers that would laugh at my stuttering. So I wanted to get my high school diploma and done. And I became a carpenter. Because I thought, well, if I'll just swing a hammer, so I won't have to talk. And I soon had an opportunity to to join a construction management team. Started taking classes and just advanced. Just got on the fast track, you know, and the rest, as they say, is history. And it just, you know, I was in charge of the jobs, and all of a sudden, you know, I'm a construction manager, then division manager, and all of a sudden, you know, I'm in charge. You know, so my confidence just skyrocketed. You know, and I got to the point where it didn't matter if I was going to block or not. I mean, I was going to say what I had to say, and also the things were so fast paced. It seemed like I didn't have time to really think about stuttering. I mean, I just had to focus on what needs to be done next.
And you are, I mean, you were obviously progressing in the company, so the people in the company were saying, look, you know, the bottom line is you were competent at what you were doing, and it wasn't your perfect fluency or lack thereof that was determining who they wanted to get those jobs. It was who they think can get the job done, who they knew could get it done. Right? And that's a key thing to realize, I think, is that, well, for example, I've got a friend who stutters who's a really good computer programmer, and he's about to interview at Google here in a couple of weeks.
Oh, okay.
Right? And is, you know, stutter like many of us that, you know, for much of our life. He's really concerned about, you know, what they're going to think about a stutter. But as I told him, look, they're not hiring you to be a computer programmer, but because of your speech fluency. 99% of the people in the world are fluent, and they can't get a job. You know, most can't get a job at Google as a computer programmer. What they care about is whether you know your stuff as a computer programmer. So it can be very tempting for us to reach for tricks and to substitute our words and to not say what we really have to say, because have that urge to be perceived as fluent and to not stutter. But really, they don't care about how fluent you are on saying the term. They want to make sure you know the term, right? And so if you substitute a technical word for another word, which is not the real technical word, people will think, well, he doesn't know that basic technical term here. How much does he really know computer programming? And so it's way better to stutter on that word, but say the right word, right? Than to choose some substitute words that make it sound like you don't know what the heck you're talking about in this field.
Yeah.
And right, and that wouldn't have been doable as a manager if you were always not saying what you wanted to say, because you gotta communicate what's in your head to other people. And so people around you, I mean, you know, people that worked for you and superiors, they just got used to the fact that Tom's got a bit of a stutter. Just be patient, right? And he's got good stuff coming for you. Right? Like, you know, you've got something good to say. Just be patient and wait for it to come. Was that what you noticed?
So it happened to me, and I'm not sure if you had a similar experience, but I was in a fairly large company. Not everyone knew Tom Scharstein, but it seemed like everyone in the company knew the guy that stuttered. And so stuttering actually made me memorable. You know, I didn't truly appreciate that um, um, that label until years later. Then I look back and I was like, well, that's why everyone knew me, because of my stutter. So I thought that was pretty wild.
That is cool. It's kind of like, well, I think it can sort of be the underdog effect. I mean, I felt that uh, when I was in dental school. So when I graduated, and my dad just pointed this out to me. I graduated 15 years ago, but my dad just pointed this out to me recently. We were hanging out with friends, family friends, and he pointed out that I got one of the loudest of the 300 plus kids that graduated in that dental school class. He said, and I don't remember it, exactly to compare it to other noise levels when they walked across the stage, but my dad said, and it did ring a bell, I got a pretty good one. And I don't think I had done, I mean, I was I mean, I'm not sure if that would have been there if as much, if I just would have been no stutter, nothing clearly making things a bit more challenging for me. But everybody there, and I'd gotten to know just about everybody in the class, knew I had a pretty, in those days, severe stutter.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
all my professors knew, everybody knew, but I was still, they were going to call me doctor just like they called everybody else doctor. And I I think there is kind of that underdog effect. You see this a little bit. I think you saw it with Stephen Hawking. That's an example,
Oh,
right?
yeah, of
Right?
course.
He was a great physicist in his own right, one of the best of the 20th century, early 21st century. But probably you and I, who are not physicists, would have never heard that name. He wouldn't have been as legendary a figure if he
Right.
had
Sure.
challenges that the rest of us, didn't have. And so it almost, these things can become almost an opportunity to be a hero or to inspire people, and not in just a sympathy way, but people can imagine. Look, they don't know what it's like to stutter, but they can say, look, I can imagine how that would make it, a little more difficult to do things, to have to battle through your syllables, and so we can become a genuine source of inspiration.
Yeah. That's what's so magical about Toastmasters, because Toastmaster clubs, they love people who stutter uh, joining the club. I mean, it really takes that club to the next level, and just wanting to build build this person's confidence, their encouragement, and just always uh, they cheer us on. Uh, so I'm going to my next round in the um, Toastmaster competition Saturday, and I um, um, I'm known in the Toastmaster circle down here as um, the guy that stutters representing South Florida. They don't mention me by name, but everyone knows there's a guy who stutters that's going to represent South Florida Saturday, and everybody, um, as you said, they cheer the underdog, and it is definitely a it's my Mount Everest in my stuttering journey, to go up in a speaking competition against fluent people. So yeah,
Nice. And
I can
it's,
relate to what you're saying.
yeah, and I think it's related to courage. I mean, in the case of stuttering, especially, public speaking takes courage, even if you have no stutter. It takes some courage, but with a stutter, it takes a lot of courage. and people respect courage. Like that's a universally respected quality. So, you know, so it's not like, I don't want people to think, oh, it's just like a sympathy thing. They feel sorry. Like, that's not it. It's a courage thing. They know this has got to be challenging, and it takes what's for him to step forward and do this and just deliver a great message. And yeah, so that's that's a good thing. And as a friend of mine said, in the 21st century, being normal is so boring. You gotta have a thing. We have a thing. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I really like that saying. That's a good one.
Yeah.
That is.
So how did you go from just progressing in the company, having success, to owning your own, to sort of being your own entrepreneur, to owning a company yourself? What was the evolution there, and did it take you time to believe that you could do it, despite, like, did you have doubts at any time whether the stutter was going to hold you back in that, and you overcame them, or were you kind of confident in the fact that you could do it regardless?
So the home building industry made that decision for me back in the late 2000s when home building basically stopped. So I fell into a niche of cabinet refacing. It was a really unique opportunity. And as far as stuttering hold me back, I really can't say that stuttering held me back. It wasn't really a factor in making that decision, because I had years and years of construction management. So I've dealt with suppliers, I've dealt with subcontractors, I've dealt with buyers. So I was really used to that. So it felt like kind of a natural thing. And it's pretty cool being your own boss.
There are definitely advantages, right?
So you can relate to that.
So
pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you went to the NSA for the first time, or was it then the National Stuttering Project, or was it already called the NSA, National Stuttering Association, at that point?
So I found the National Stuttering Project in 1996. I went to a local chapter and went to my first conference in 97. And then the name change was in 98. Then it became the National Stuttering Association. And when I look back, Mike, I think, what in the world was I ever, thinking, going to a group of people that, that I envisioned are crying on each other's shoulders, and everybody's feeling sorry for each other because we stutter. And then I went to that, and I found out that these were these are pretty upbeat people. There was a lot of laughter, and then the next thing, going to that conference, and I'm like, what in the world am I doing? Now there's like 600 people that stutter, and I still remember walking through the door and hearing that hum of stuttering, and it's a unique sound. When you walk into a room and you hear the hum of conversation, but in this case, you hear the hum of stuttering. And I think that was the most healing sound that I've ever experienced in my life, because I knew that here I was a place where I was normal. And I'd been surrounded with loving friends and family and everything like that. But I always had that stuttering thing, and I never truly felt 100% normal. But then here's a place where I feel 100% normal. So that was pretty cool.
And was that Was that a turning point of sorts as far as you going back out, like once you started getting involved and then going back out into, into the fluent world more or less, and just kind of fighting that sense of isolation, knowing that you're not alone, and getting further along the road of realizing that stuttering's not the end of the world. It's okay to stutter.
Yeah, so from that point on, Mike, I didn't think of stuttering as a detriment to myself. I mean, it became part of me. I mean, I stutter, and becoming part of the global stuttering community has it's made my life richer. I've traveled to conferences, all over the place. I've got friends around the world, and it's not just friends that I've met online, and I've got, they've seen my profile and I've seen their profile. I mean, people that I actually know, and that's because of stuttering. And it's made my life richer, See, second part of your question, and then they talked me into joining this, this crazy thing called Toastmasters, that did this public speaking, and it was people in the NSA that they convinced me to try that, and man, I really struggled. Like it was a struggle, because the only public speaking experience that I had outside the corporate setting was a church, so here I've got this room full of strangers, and all these things are coming back up again, and I was really struggling through it, and then I had an experience that just ignited me. So this Toastmaster club, so it had about 60 people in it. It was a big club, and the club president just got up there, and she was doing a speech one night, and by this time I'd given a couple speeches, and I was really having a hard time with it. And so she got up, and one of her analogies, she mentioned a stammering fool. And so so everybody just got real quiet. They kind of looked at her, and they kind of looked at me, and it was just kind of weird that she would say that. It was just a figure of speech, but I was in the room, and so that became a Kairos moment for me that ignited me, because now I was on fire, and I had something to prove to myself that I could do this, so and from that point on, man, every speaking opportunity I have in Toastmasters, my hand's up. I love it. And I walked away from Toastmasters for a few years because life got busy. And then I realized, man, I need that Toastmasters for the rest of my life. I need that speaking pressure. That's integral to my stuttering strategy.
And is it crucial because that's a way of essentially making sure that you keep pushing that comfort zone out? I've found, and from talking to people, that the comfort zone tends to shrink in for a lot of us folks that stutter unless we're actively seeking out those speaking opportunities and making sure that it's not collapsing in.
It's a great visual. It's like being in a balloon that keeps like deflating. You just kind of keep inflating and pushing it out. Yeah. It's continual.
Well, and I think, and you and I have seen each other in some. Well, you're leading the NSA Friday night lounge thing here during May. Take this opportunity to try to encourage you to continue to do that sometimes in the future, even after the COVID lockdown. I think it's awesome But from
Glad you enjoy it.
yeah, it's fun. But from talking with, a lot of folks that stutter during this lockdown, a lot of people are finding their speech a little more challenging. I don't know. Have you heard that as well?
Yeah, yeah. I've experienced that personally because a couple people have asked me, um, are you okay?
Hmm.
Because you're stuttering so much more than normal.
Well, and right, and do you think that's linked with the same thing we were saying before?
Yeah.
Because we're not even allowed for large periods of time here to get out and live and interact with everybody. So everybody's supposed to stay home, and for a person that stutters, that means a shrinking sort of comfort zone, and therefore those typical interactions, maybe a phone call with a friend that 2 or 3 months ago when we were out and about every day, all day, wouldn't have been as challenging, is suddenly more challenging because we maybe haven't talked to hardly anybody in a few days, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, this is um, a horrific time for people who stutter. I mean, people are really struggling through this. I've um, been to numerous online chapter meetings, and people are having a very difficult time working through the isolation. Um, yeah, so we're we're not alone. I mean, it seems to be a common theme among people who stutter right now.
And it's kind of, I would bet that there's probably no academic specifically doing a study right now on people that stutter during COVID for this purpose, but you're seeing it, I'm seeing it, a lot of people are seeing it. It's an interesting in mass experiment, well, on all people really, but in this case,
Yeah,
people that stutter, and seeing how does this kind of social isolation affect one
yeah,
speech. And I think it's significant, but it's a good insight, perhaps, into the importance of getting out there and talking to people, and like we said, pushing that comfort zone, because you know, uh, as they say, you can learn things from. Oftentimes, we learn more from negatives than we do from positives in life. Sometimes, and this might be an example, like a clear-cut stuttering experiment, if you will, to hopefully teach us all a lesson of how important it is to, when it's advisable, again, from a virus standpoint, to get out there in the world as much as possible.
there has been a huge positive through this isolation, though. We had talked about virtual meetings for the last couple years among the chapters, and we've had maybe a dozen, definitely less than 20, and 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 through the COVID, and, the social um, um, isolations, so we can no longer have the in-person chapter meetings, and so chapter leaders tried them, and and people who stutter like it. So at first, to watch yourself, on the screen stutter, among a bunch of other people, it's very intimidating. People don't feel comfortable doing it. But I think that once we all tried this, I mean, it's just exploded. In the first 7 weeks of the lockdown, I mean, I stopped counting online chapter meetings and events at 113. That was a couple weeks ago, and there's chapters that are having online meetings weekly now. They have game nights, they have all kinds of stuff. So we start the virtual lounge, as you'd mentioned before, on Friday nights, and people who stutter are finding a new means of connection through this. So this is a good thing that has come from the social isolation period.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it might be well, hopefully it's a trend that'll stick around. I mean, obviously we want to, when we can, go back to in-person meetings also.
Yeah.
Don't cut those out. But yeah, I mean, because most chapters, in my experience, have meetings once a month, right? A lot of times, people might have a big commute. Say if they're in the suburbs, they got to go into the city. And that's, like I said, it's worthwhile to get together in person, but if you can keep having those one per month in person, and if you have one or two per month or whatever, virtual, it's also great. Well, not only is it just more time with other people that stutter, which is positive for everybody, it's also just, like you said, practice with Zoom calls, because in a lot of workplaces, especially post-COVID, I think Zoom calls in general, video conferencing, is going to be more a part of human culture post-COVID in general than it was pre-COVID, just because everybody's doing it during COVID and kind of getting used to it. So that's going to be a part of people's workplaces for the rest of their careers in many cases. So it's good to get that extra sort of comfort level and practice from doing these.
Yes. So we realized right away that we needed to create as much opportunity as possible for people who stutter to get comfortable with these online calls. We have chapter meetings now almost daily. There was one night a couple weeks ago where we had 9 chapter meetings in the same night. So there's plenty of opportunity for people who stutter to hop on online chapter meetings.
That's fantastic, and it obviously means you can meet. Like in the last few weeks, I've gone to chapter meetings in California, in Washington State, in Philadelphia, all over the place. I think tonight, I believe there's one in the Bronx and one in San Diego. So you're getting to know people, whereas usually I'd maybe only meet those people at a conference, which is a once event, which is a great event, but it's great to be able to, meet people throughout the year. I think it's going to bring the whole community that much closer together. Lots more people will know each other. Now you'll go to conferences and they're like,
hey, so you on Zoom.
That's awesome. And it's good for getting to know something I like, because I'm not that great always with remembering names. If I go into a group and I meet 10 people, I'm lucky the first try to remember 2 or 3 names.
Sure.
Zoom calls, I can keep, Tom Scharstein, Susie, whatever. Name up there next to them the entire time. So pretty cool.
Statistically too, Mike, there's been more people coming to online chapter meetings than in-person chapter meetings. And I found that just fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to get to, right? Just especially if it's at night, your workday is over, no commute, no gas spent. Good. I don't know if I'm sure this is not officially endorsed, but if somebody wants to have a cocktail, they don't have to worry about drinking, driving, anything like that. Just it's very convenient.
Sure, yep, it sure is. Yeah, so nothing really replaces the in-person chapter meeting. I mean, when you feel the presence of another person, and you've got this group, and you're feeling the energy of the um, 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 group. So we're not sure how the online chapter meetings will tie in to the future. I mean, they will definitely be an important part. Um, this is all so new. I mean, we're not really sure, So I mean, everything's still fluid, but um, but the stuttering community has embraced um, online meetings, and just really, I am truly grateful for that.
Awesome. Yeah, and like you said, it is all new, so who knows? I mean, obviously you don't want it to take away where nobody ever wants to go to in-person ones because they just do Zoom.
Yeah,
That's not the goal, of course. But it also could draw more people in who might be on the fence about whether they want to go to their first NSA meeting, perhaps for the same reason you said you were thinking. And I honestly, so I just started coming a couple of years ago to NSA meetings, and since I started, I love it. But prior to that, I had been kind of like you. I was thinking, maybe it's a bunch of people just sitting around feeling sorry for themselves, crying on each other's shoulders. That's not going to make me feel any better, But it's, and people are free to bring whatever emotions they want, of course. So there's some of everything, and that's fine. But there's, like you said, a lot of positivity, and you feel better after going to these meetings for whatever reason. I don't even know if I can fully explain it, but everybody I know has been pleasantly surprised when they go to a meeting. They're like, oh, that was actually really cool, right?
yeah.
I mean, you don't know exactly what psychology is at work, but it's something, and it's definitely uplifting for the vast majority of people that take the plunge and do it.
Yeah, speaking from experience, I can watch a YouTube video. I can I can read a book, but um, um, when I meet someone like you, that's the, uh, uh, that's leading um, a successful life. I mean, I see it. I feel it. And and that's when I believe it. So uh, uh, so I think that's one of the part of the magic about the National Stutter Association. Is because you get to see people that are um, living it, walking the talk.
Yeah. Yeah. And yes, there's something about that as compared to just reading it in a book. Oh, so and so did this or that. Yes. Something about seeing it and feeling their energy and enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Like, no, stuttering doesn't have to ruin our life for sure. And in fact, if we reframe the way that we see it, it can actually enhance our life, like give us an opportunity to become a hero on some level.
Yeah.
Right. So I hear you. So, yeah. So I don't know that I have any more questions in particular. I mean, we could sit here and talk for 3 hours, I'm sure.
I'm sure we could. Probably 3 days.
Are there any, kind of closing thoughts at all? Anything that you want to share with the not yet millions, but perhaps millions of people in the future watching this?
Glad you asked, Mike. There's a doctorate student, Tiffany, from Seattle, Washington, and she's doing her thesis right now. And so she's researching and studying the So the area between covert stuttering and obvious stuttering, for lack of a better term, so covert stuttering has been widely used through the years, and it seems to have a different meaning for different people. Some people say that that covert stuttering means try not to stutter, with word substitution, sentence starters, and such. Other people say that the covert stuttering is hiding your stuttering, it's truly hiding your stuttering, being afraid to let other people know that you stutter. Okay. And then we have another group that's kind of obvious stuttering, where there's no way really to hide your stuttering. For most of my life, I mean, I was in the obvious group. There was no way I was going to be able to hide it. If I wanted to say anything, I was going to stutter on it. Even if I tried to substitute a word, I would stutter on the substituted word. I couldn't hide it.
Same with me.
So there's this area here that really hasn't been talked about. It really hasn't been focused on, and I think that I would be part of this group. I try not to stutter. I mean, that is my stuttering strategy. I try not to stutter. I will switch words. If I have to say a certain term that I know that I'm a stutter on, I go ahead and say it, without hesitation. But that's not covert stuttering. Everyone in my life knows that I stutter, and that I'm part of the National Stuttering Association. So I'm not trying to hide it, and I'm not afraid of stuttering in front of people. That is my personal strategy that I've developed, and that's the flow that I am comfortable with. And it's never really been talked about. And I think that group, that the lines get blurred between that and covert stuttering, and I think it's mislabeled sometime as being a covert stutter. So the question is being afraid of stuttering the same as trying not to stutter? I mean, that's the question that's being explored right now. I think it's an incredible conversation.
And so just to make sure I understand it, so historically we kind of think of the covert stutterers and the obvious or the overt stutterers, right? And one thing that I've heard, overt stutterers have been sometimes described as just people who were too severe to hide anything, so they were overt. Because the vast majority of us historically we're not trying to stutter, right? I mean, unless you're using say a voluntary stuttering technique, for the most part, we're trying not to stutter. And so there's those two kind of traditional poles, covert and obvious or overt, but you're saying that area in between where you're not hiding the fact that you stutter, you tell people you stutter, you tell them you're involved in, stuttering support community, but you're also trying, you will switch words, you're trying to make it come out as non-stuttery as you can, for lack of a better term.
Good term. I've never heard that before.
End up in the spot. So that's kind of that in between place that's being explored by Tiffany.
Yeah. So the question is, what is overt stuttering? because when I was growing up, I mean, I stuttered on every single word, you know. So would that be considered overt stuttering? And and maybe that's not the true definition of of overt stuttering, because I didn't want to talk, because I didn't want to stutter, you know. So I would um, avoid situations where I would have to potentially talk. So is overt stuttering uh, of the type of person that has a personal strategy that they're comfortable with, and that just goes out and uh, and does whatever they want to do. You know, and stuttering is no longer a factor. You know, sometimes they stutter, sometimes they don't, but stuttering does not hold them back from anything. So I think that's part of the question.
Mm. And there's a lot of people that are overt because they're so severe. They would like to be covert if they could, right? But they just don't have a, you know. I mean, I was so severe that I couldn't hide. I mean, whatever word I was going to switch to, but like you said, yourself and child, I was going to stutter on that too.
Yeah.
Not as long,
Yeah.
right? There was
Yeah.
no hiding it. But I was still in high school prior to getting to a point in college where I just said, you know, well, I got some eye contact training where I was brought out and made by the speech therapist to look people in the eye when I stuttered. And for me, that was a game changer because I realized
Well,
I would just sit there and listen. Like that shocked me. You know, I thought they were all going to react like that kid, you know, that one bully kid on the playground at 12 years old,
right,
right?
right.
Tend to take those worst experiences from childhood and project it on the world. Like everybody's going to think what, you know, Johnny thought, you know, on the playground. Um, but yeah, so my stutter didn't quote improve all that much after I learned to look people in the eye, but my happiness changed a lot. And where I could, so I was then overt, truly overt in the sense where like I'm gonna talk. If I'm gonna talk, I'm gonna stutter because I don't know how not to stutter. But I'm not just gonna shut myself up just because I'm gonna stutter because you know I have free
Sure.
speech too, right? The First
Right.
Amendment applies to stutterers also, right? And but before eye contact training, I was overt because I was too severe not for people not to know, but I was still trying like hell to hide it. Was avoiding situations. I was, you know, avoiding eye contact. I was not introducing, you know, the whole gamut of things trying to be covert, but I was technically overt. Now, if I had been more mild, I mean, I think to be a successful overt and still to talk in the world, you have to be presumably fairly mild because you got to be able to switch your words and do your tricks and still have it come across as being, you know, fluent. But most listeners might just, well, when someone is super covert, changing words all over the place, they tend to not necessarily make sense when they talk, right? I mean, if you're just saying whatever you can say, like my favorite color is, and you want to say green, but you say blue because that's what you can say, then you got to remember when you talk to that person the next day what you said your favorite color was yesterday, right? So you're like literally lying about who you are, right? Who you are, and that's a you know not a very fun way to live, right? Because you can't be yourself. So I think there's all. So yes, I think the spectrum. It's a it's a great thing that she's exploring that because it's really not near as cut and dry as overt and covert. There's all this shades of gray and all
Yeah.
a lot of overlap between the
Yeah.
different ones for most people, I think. You know.
And so what's fascinating about stuttering is there's really not a right or a wrong way to stutter. You know, it's um, uh, there was a professor, Dr. Fred Murray, and he spent his whole life studying stuttering. And I was lucky to have a cup of coffee with him a few years back. And I said, Fred, you know, after all this time, um, what is the best treatment as far as stuttering? And Fred said, whatever works, you know, and that's all he said, whatever works.
Gotcha. Yeah, and there isn't much consensus as to what technique, right? I mean, as you know, the other techniques are all over the map. Some focus on A, some focus on B, some focus on C, kind of all over the map.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
You know, and it's also, I think, as the NSA realizes, and I think this has been an even stronger growing trend in recent years, it's really about the person who stutters being content with their life. It's not all about how much you stutter, how fluent you are, because, you know, I think our tendency, a lot of our tendencies at times in our life has been to say to ourselves, man, if I was just fluent, you know, it would be like a heavenly landscape, you know, you know, like we would just be, you know, pure beings of joy sort of thing. But the reality is that, I don't know. I think we've overrated fluency in our mind. And I think perhaps the treatment world, at least historically, has overrated, like, the only thing that matters about this person I'm working with is to get them where they're not stuttering anymore, you know. And yes, that's great if somebody cannot be, you know, struggling over their syllables as much, that's fantastic. But ultimately it's about the whole person. It's about being a happy camper and fulfilling your potential, you know, on this earth. And, you know, as I like to say, look, 99% of the losers in the world are fluent. So, you know, however you define loser, you know, so it's like fluency is no ticket to being an impressive human being, you know,
Yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, and I think it makes it that much more difficult for us to be okay with stuttering or execute whatever technique we're trying to use to be more in control of our speech when we're putting so much performance anxiety on ourselves. Like, you got to be fluent, you got to be fluent, you got to be normal,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
normal, you know.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but you have any?
So went to a therapy session about a year ago for Lisa, um, um, so for Lisa's daughter Annie. So she's one of the leading fluency specialists down here, Liz Blank, and I was just amazed. I mean, I sat back and therapy session was an hour long, and and and, and so really surprised me is that Annie wasn't reading a book for a half hour, and that she wasn't practicing all these fluency techniques for the whole time. Because my speech therapy back in the 70s, I mean, I just, you know, read a book to speech language pathologists, you know, or we practiced like a fluency technique the whole time. And I was amazed because, you know, Liz dealt with the person and the emotions behind the stuttering. I mean, it's more of a true therapy session than um, um, a um, a a voice workout, so to speak. And I was just amazed. I mean, speech language pathologist, it's just evolved so much in the last 40 years. It just blew me away. You know, it ties with what you were just talking about. You know, it's not just the mechanical functions. It's everything else. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's so key to really understand it on more of a whole person level, I think.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that
yeah.
lays the groundwork for growth. Whereas if you're just sitting there reading from a book, well, you can do that at home in your room alone, no problem, right? Very few of
Yeah,
us
right.
stutter a whole lot when we're alone. So it's the question of how do you get at the emotions and just hopefully getting people where they're comfortable in their own skin. And once you're comfortable, once somebody's along that road of self-acceptance, then all things become possible, right? When you're not utterly terrified of having a disfluency and what the world is going to think about you if you do. And some of that is desensitization, right? Just doing it.
Yeah,
Like we were talking earlier about the comfort zone. It's
yeah,
so important to be kind of making sure you're not shutting yourself up in the world and out there speaking opportunities and that sort of thing.
yeah.
But everybody's got their own journey, and it's a growth process, and you have to build up to that. I wouldn't say everybody just necessarily jump in 100% from the first second, but certainly be kind of have that as the goal, because to thwart our personality in the world and to not be yourself is arguably the greatest tragedy that somebody can have in their life, right? And we got to be ourselves. Um, and I think that generally gets, for all the really young people out there watching, that gets easier generally as you get older, right? I mean, I like that analogy, right? How many 85-year-olds, when they get dressed in the morning, then look in the mirror and like, I don't know if people are going to like these pants or not. Whatever, I don't give a what. Whereas the 22-year-old might be like, oh, I don't know if my pants are cool enough, that sort of thing, right? So, yeah, so we
Well,
generally
I see a lot of people down here in South Florida that live that, Mike.
we get more comfortable in our own skin over time.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But it was great talking to you, Tom. I thoroughly
Oh, it was
enjoyed
great talking to you today
the
too. So
conversation. And
thank you for having me on your show. I
absolutely.
appreciate it.
Yeah, keep up the good work, man.
Always, man, always.
We will talk.
So if I could say one last thing,
Yeah.
especially the um, the young ones out there, I think that if I could speak to my younger self, I would just say, with regarding stuttering and regarding speaking, win every day. When it comes to speaking, if you fear it, do it.
I completely agree.
It does get better.
I completely agree. And you realize that those things that you're most afraid of here, well, first of all, worst case scenario, somebody doesn't like your stutter, but that's not going to make you bleed. That's not going to put you in jail. That's not going to have any dire consequences other than maybe your feelings, but your feelings, you realize over time that what other people think about you doesn't determine who you are. And you'll also realize the vast majority of people are not going to have any problem with your stutter. They just want to hear what you have to say. And, if you just are yourself and you say what you have to say and, stutter if you stutter, people will accept you, and you can get, find a great wife or husband. You can start a company. You can be a great father. There's nothing that stuttering has to stop you from doing, as much as it seems like it's going to stop you from doing everything when you're a teenager, which is how most of us felt. You know, and get involved with the support communities, right? There's that, there's a Stuttering Association of the Young, you know, they have a camp that's really cool where kids can go to, or just, you know, there's now going to be more online support groups for you to get involved in. I know there's a, what's it called? The family NSA. I mean, it's the NSA, but it's the family meetings. So that's got the
It's all the family chapters in the NSA.
yeah,
They've got online meetings as well as adult chapters. Yeah.
lots of resources. So, you know, get to know other people that stutter,
Yeah.
and, you know, pushing out that comfort zone.
All right.
Nice talking, man. We'll talk to you soon, Tom.
All right. Sounds good, Mike. Thanks again for having me.
Take care, my friend.